Last thing that we are going to do with radicals this week, we'll continue on with more radical work next week, is multiplying radicals. So just like you can split things apart, you can also multiply them together. The square root of 10 times the square root of 2 is equal to the square root of 10 times 2, which is 20. But before you just draw a box around it and call it the final answer, you do need to make sure that if it can be simplified, that you simplify it. So the square root of 20, imagine that was your original problem. Can I simplify it? Yes, 20 is 4 times 5, so the square root of 4 is 2. The square root of 5 can't be simplified, so the square root of 10 times the square root of 2 simplifies to be 2 root 5. And then the next one we're going to do is kind of intense, but we can handle it. So the square root of 105 y to the 4th z squared times the square root of 2x to the 5th. So I feel like we went from level 1 to level 8, but we can do it. I think it'll be a little more straightforward than maybe it looks. The first note that I'm going to make is that I usually go and write things in alphabetical order just to give myself some sort of consistency. That's a pretty general rule, good rule to follow. So I'm going to combine everything underneath the square roots like I did in the last problem. The only thing that actually can combine, though, is the 105 and the 2. 105 times 2 is 210. So I'm not losing the fact that this is a square root. And then because none of these variables combine, I'm just going to write them in alphabetical order. So x to the 5th, y to the 4th, z squared. Okay, so now I am going to split this up into actually a total of 4 separate pieces. I'm going to do the square root of 210. I'm going to do the square root of x to the 5th, the square root of y to the 4th, the square root of z squared, and combine them all at the end. So let's think about 210. I don't necessarily know my factors of 210 off the top of my head, and both 105 and 2 are not perfect squares. So let's see, which of these perfect squares goes into 210? So I'm just going to try 210 divided by 4, no. 210 divided by 9, no. 16, no. 25, no. Maybe nothing. Maybe 210 is as simplified as it gets. 49, 64, I'm losing hope. 210 divided by 81, divided by 100. It's not going to be anything more than that. So yeah, the square root of 210 doesn't simplify. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't know if it makes the problem easier or harder. We still had to go through and think about it. But the square root of 210 just stays the square root of 210. All right, the square root of x to the 5th. So x to the 5th means there are 5 x's. So I can take out 2 pairs, so that's x squared, and what's left underneath the square root is another x. If I've got 4 y's, that means I got 4 y's, so I can take out 2 groups of 2, so that becomes y squared. And then z squared, the square root of z squared, I can just take out 1 group, so it's just z. So I guess I can write this right here so then that way I don't forget about it. But here's what you're going to do. You're going to write your final answer. You're going to put everything that's out front, that came out of being underneath the square root out front. And I'm going to put them in alphabetical order. So I've got x squared, then I've got y squared, then I've got z, square root of what's left underneath the root. So a 210 and an x. So this right here is the final answer. X squared, y squared, z, root 210x. And that x is still underneath the square root.